Hello trumpet players, this is video number 7 in our trumpet listening video series. In this video we're going to talk about playing gigs. In the last video, I said that public performances were the best listening you could do, but I said there was one exception. There's nothing better in terms of listening than playing gigs with established musicians. There's nothing better. And the only reason I don't list that as the kind of listening that you should do is because, first of all, if you don't have gigs, then you don't have gigs, right? I mean, if you're in junior high, most likely you're not out there playing jobs with professional musicians. So that's not actually an option for you right now. That said, sometimes there are these concerts that people will put on where they invite a professional band to augment the junior high band or the high school band. What a beautiful opportunity that is, right? It's a beautiful opportunity for the professional musicians because they feel like they're doing something, giving back to the community, right? But it's a wonderful opportunity for the kids. They get to now have a little piece of what I'm talking about in this video. So if you ever have an opportunity to do that with your band program or something like that, I would say jump on it. There's nothing better for the kids than to be right next to a professional player. Nothing better. Now, I think to a lesser degree, there's also the same thing going on at the school level, right? So, for example, when I was in high school, Roger Morgan and David Esquivel were 2 grades ahead of me. Well, David was 1 grade ahead of me, and Roger was, I think I got that backwards. David was 2 and Roger was 1 year ahead of me. And to me, to hear them, that was valuable. That was valuable. I needed that. And so, and same thing at the college level, you can't imagine what an influence Mike Middleton was on my playing. Mike Middleton, for so many years, my concept of what a lead player was, or sounded like, was just an image, an oral image in my head of what Mike Middleton sounded like. It wasn't until I started playing professionally here in Houston and gig after gig after gig after gig, I heard somebody else. And we'll talk about that in a second. But yes, that definitely had an impact on my playing. Now, if I were to compare, so I've played with some famous people before, right? I actually had an avant-garde gig one time where Tim Hagen sat right here, and he was on the same gig I was. He wasn't just being, I've played gigs where the famous guy was the guest artist, right? I've played a lot of those. A lot of them. But Tim Hagen's was in the band on that gig, right? And yes, and same thing would happen. I did a gig one time with Frank Sinatra Jr., and Frank Sinatra Jr. was touring with his father's band. And right here to my right was Walt Johnson. And in fact, Walt Johnson had me spell him on some of the charts, right? I was like the assistant lead guy to Walt Johnson. And yes, when I look back at my life, those kinds of moments had an impact in my playing, but I'm going to tell you, not nearly as much of an impact as sitting next to Dennis Dotson for years. And sitting next to Buddy Cisco for years. Dennis Dotson is a local trumpet player, but used to play in New York, used to play in Las Vegas, and was, I think, 7 years with the Woody Herman Band. He's an established, nationally established jazz trumpet player. Week after week after week, with him to my right, hearing his beautiful interpretation of the chord progressions. By the way, Dennis is, I want to say Dennis, as a improvising jazz trumpet player, I want to say that Dennis is the most beautiful jazz trumpet player. I'm talking about like the lines that he plays are the most beautiful lines you'll ever hear in your life. And that's why people are always asking him to play ballads, right? Because of that beauty. He's got such a beautiful approach to the changes and such a beautiful approach to the melody and such a beautiful sound. How can you sit next to that for years, for decades? I just played with Dennis in a big band just 3 days ago in a rehearsal. How can you sit next to that for all those years and not have it affect you? And the same thing with the lead playing. Now, a lot of times when I was playing with Dennis, Dennis used to say to me that he liked my lead playing, which is a huge compliment. He said he liked my lead playing because of my swing feel. So a lot of times I'll be on the gig with him playing lead and he'll be playing second. But there were other times when, and this is my favorite section, by the way. When I think back about my career, those times when it was me on third trumpet, Buddy Cisco on first, and Dennis on second. Those are my favorite trumpet memories because of the impact that had on my playing. And there's no amount of listening to famous people, and even the public concerts, nothing will ever equal that in my life. And you know what, to another extent, when I go back to El Paso, when I think of, go back mentally, when I go back to my time in El Paso, and I look at how much time I spent working with my teacher there, Sam Trimble, I played a lot of gigs. We did recording sessions. My first professional recording session was with Sam Trimble. He played first, I played second. I was assistant principal, I think was my official position for the El Paso Symphony. So I sat next to him in the El Paso Symphony. I did chamber music concerts with him. Every once in a while I would play with his brass quintet. How can that not, especially if you're having lessons with the guy, how can that not impact your playing? This is by far the most valuable listening that you can do. And this brings something up too. There is an art to listening. There's a lot of people who will get on the gig and just play. And they're not aware of what's going on around them. I don't remember who it was, but when I was in, I think it was college, so it's most likely this story was Hofstetter. I forget his name. Anyway, Dr. Hofstetter in El Paso. I can't remember his first name right now. He's passed away now. Very, very influential person in my career, just like all these other people that I'm talking about. He was the conductor of the wind ensemble. And I have a vague memory of him in the rehearsal. Now, I might be getting this wrong. It might have been somebody else, but this is how I remember it. He would stop in the middle of a piece and point to you and ask you, what were the horns playing right now? Or what were the clarinets playing when I stopped? He didn't want us to only be paying attention to our own part. He wanted us to have our ears open so that we could hear what was going on in the ensemble. And I think you need to do that for this, what I'm saying, to be true. When I say that I got benefit from sitting next to Dennis Dotson all those years, I'm not saying that in a social, look at me, I'm so important kind of way. Because of that training I had in college, because we were told not to only pay attention to our own part, but to be listening to what's going on around you, to the whole picture. What is every instrument doing? Because of that, that's why I was able to take benefit from listening to both Dennis and Buddy. And don't get me wrong, there have been other players too. I think for me personally, that has been the most significant. In terms of trumpet players, there have been a whole bunch of others. I could list influential musicians that I've worked with. It'd be a long, long, long list. Cesar Morales at the top, right? I played with Cesar for a long time. We played gig after gig after gig after gig. You cannot do that kind of work and not be influenced by that. Johnny Torres, David Caceres. I worked with David Caceres' band for 20 years. How can that not make a difference? Working with people like Larry Slazak, who just recently passed away. How can that not make a difference? So that is at the highest pinnacle of most beneficial listening. That is the highest pinnacle. And it kind of supports this old saying that people used to say, I don't know if they still say it, you have to have a gig to get a gig. Have you ever heard that? It's like it's a different version of you have to have money to make money. You have to have a gig to get a gig. By sitting next to somebody, and I'm going to go back to this again. It's the culture. I've said this on almost every other listening video. If you have your ears open and you're listening to what's going on around you and you're not so self-absorbed that you don't have that, you are now a living organism that's part of that economy, that ecology, that community. If your attitude is, I have to do my thing, then you're not getting that. You have to be able to play and hear at the same time. Yeah, and what do you have to hear? You know, the first thing you need to be able to hear, like if you're a classical player, is the pitch. If you can't hear the pitch because you think you're in tune, you're not part of the group. You have to be listening, and you adjust constantly. Pitch, time, phrasing, balance. You don't just say, oh, it says mezzo forte, I'm playing mezzo forte. No, you play mezzo forte in the context of the ensemble you're working with. If your mezzo forte is either too soft or too loud for the context, you're doing it wrong. Listening. So this ensemble listening thing is huge. If you don't have that, you're missing out on everything. If you don't have that, there's no value in you as a musician. The only thing you can do is solo gigs. We don't need, people there that are only interested in their own stuff. So this is the ultimate listening you can do. Be on stage with the guys that are already doing it. That's the most valuable. It's just, when you're a student, it's kind of hard to get that. Right? So that's the only reason I didn't list it as the most important, because a lot of you are students that don't have this as an option. Okay? That's what I got for you in this video. We're almost done with this series. The next video is about transcriptions, which I believe is the ultimate form of listening to recordings. Okay, so we're going to talk about transcriptions. Later in the year, we'll talk about how to do a transcription. We're just going to talk in the next video about the importance of transcriptions, okay? All right, well, God bless you. We'll see you on that next video, and thank you very much.